Hello and welcome everybody. This is Ben Munson with FarmQA doing another webinar for you. Today we're going to cover what's new. So the intention is to cover functionality that we've built throughout the last calendar year. So it's going to be a big webinar in the sense that there's going to be a lot to cover. Some of the major things that I'll talk through, there are full webinars on in themselves. And so I will go through a little bit less on that in this webinar, but we'll reference others throughout the process. But with that, would love to dive in and give you a recap of what has been added to FarmQA in 2025. So with that, we'll cover our major functionality. We'll talk through kind of some year-end roll-up and talk through how getting started for 2026 and how you can best utilize FarmQA for doing that. So with that, I did want to give a little shout out to our team and what we've been doing here at FarmQA. So we've been working really hard. And specifically, I pulled out some numbers around how many releases of our web application we've done. Turned out that was 50 releases in this year, along with 22 mobile app releases. So with that, very much growing and adding functionality at a rapid pace. And it's all based on feedback from our customers. And we would love to continue that trend. So please continue to provide valuable feedback, and we will iterate on the product and make it the best in class agronomy platform. With that being said, I'm going to cover some of our major functionality that we've added this year. So on my bulleted list here, I've got formula-based prescriptions. This is the ability to create a script or a formula, maybe based on some university guidelines or from a soil lab, or perhaps you have your own secret sauce formula into how you want it to equate, say, yield goals, lab results, any kind of combination of inputs, and factor that into a prescription. That is what we've added around the formula-based prescription side. We also support print map books, and this is the concept of getting a PDF output, each page being a color-coded map of your nutrients. We also have more functionality around nutrient blending, so focusing on fertility products and being able to help you with the math of coming up with the right blends and planning across a whole season for your nutrient needs. With that, we have added more functionality around lab submittal sheets, being able to do that, include a sheet in the box that gets shipped to a lab, but also in that being able to retrieve that data more efficiently as part of that process, and also added the option to produce barcodes as FarmQA and put those on your bags. We've released an entirely new app called QA Farmer that is designed for the growers of agronomists, co-ops, retails. That app can be used to view reports coming from an agronomist that uses FarmQA as their agronomy platform. And that includes notifications through text and mobile push notifications to be notified when new reports have come from an agronomist to a grower. Those can then be viewed, interacted with as far as marking recommendations as sprayed or completed, and then marking when you viewed the scouting reports. Additionally, we added some layer transparency, so map functionality, viewing layers is a strength of ours at FarmQA. You can now overlay multiple images and use a slider to compare that data. So with that, we're going to dive in. I do also have, before I get too far into the demo, I did pull together a list of features that we worked through. We talked about the major functionality, but a lot more in those 50 releases. And so with that, we will hopefully, or maybe attempt to link some sort of document to the video, but if that doesn't work, please reach out. We would be happy to provide more of a detailed bullet list of kind of all the functionality we built throughout the year. If you have any particular interest or a feature that you were wondering about, we'd be glad to provide this as well. So with that, you can see a lot of work done, and excited to show you what that looks like. So per usual, I'm going to jump into the product, and we're going to start on the web view. So this being controller, and I'm going to start with our formula-based prescription functionality that was built. And with that, again, there is a full webinar that we produced specifically on this feature. So for the sake of this conversation, I'm going to just briefly go over the main functionality of that, but leave the deeper dive for that other webinar. So what this feature entails is the ability to take into account your soil fertility levels. And so what I'm going to start with is I'm going to show a handful of fields that I've pre-built for this explanation here. What you're seeing in this case is I've got a field called Grid Formula 1, 2, and 3, along with Zone Formula 1, 2, and 3. In this, the main point here is just showing that we have lab results uploaded. So I've got phosphorus, potassium, sulfur results associated to the points and the zones in this case. And then for the grid formula, same concept, obviously more data with that, but you have your basic lab results in FarmQA. We have full videos on how you get that data into our software, so we'll leave that for a different time. But for now, showing how that looks. With the zone functionality, we did add the ability to display your zones in this particular view. So in my case, I can see I've got 5 sample points, 5 zones. With that, we associate the points to the zones themselves. And so in this, you can see zone 1 has the associated phosphorus, potassium, sulfur results, zone 2, etc. So the ability to see that here. With this, we now have a couple additional functions or options across the top. We can create nutrient management zones. So that's a function that is existed around just actually creating the zones, delineating, do you want 3, 5, 7, 10 zones, and the styling of that. Creating soil nutrient maps. That is a new function that is the start of the print map books. So it's the ability to say we have results at the zone level. Let's now create a pretty map per nutrient that's color coded to your specifications, which can then be provided into a PDF format for a client to show the results broken down by zone or colored. So with that, that's part of the functionality we'll show. But I'm going to show how to build formulas, and then we'll utilize all that functionality together. So with that, if I click back on the Fields tab, you'll notice a new formula option across the top. Now this is an add-on feature. So if you are watching this webinar and do not have that, we'd be happy to enable a free trial of this functionality to allow you to utilize this feature. Before I get too far into formulas, again, I'll describe that we have a catalog of formulas. So if you feel overwhelmed with the concept of a formula or creating a formula, reach out. We can provide some basic templates to start with. If you have a source that you know that you follow, maybe a university or a soil lab like mentioned, we can help you build that formula into FarmQA or digitize it in a way that works in our system, but it follows your needs as far as agronomically. With that being said, I'll talk through some of the options on the screen. So in my case, I've got a tri-state potassium recommendation. And so with that, we give the formula a name. We have output types for nutrient rate, prog rate, seeding rate, and unspecified. Nutrient rate, that represents a formula that's going to generate a result that indicates how many pounds per acre of nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium is needed. So that's probably the most common style of formula. Additionally, if you have a formula that directly produces the amount of product, so urea, potash, MAP, that would be a product rate formula. Additionally, lime is perhaps a good option for that, directly outputting a formula that tells you how much lime to apply. Seeding rate, same concept here, output just being a direct seeding rate. Unspecified is keeping the options open here for different scenarios you might want to utilize. In my case, nutrient rate is what I'm going to use. I'm going to say this formula produces how many pounds per acre, as we're seeing here, of potassium to create. Now with this, you can have different variables, so we'll just kind of collapse everything down here. So within here, you can have numeric variables, soil nutrient variables, crop nutrient coefficient or removal variables. With that, you define crops that can be utilized in the expression, and then also being able to do like multi-year equations using the concept of our growing seasons. So with that, this formula is fairly straightforward where we have a yield goal. So a numeric variable would be something you can define as yield being the term, and then say a default value, or you could leave that blank and have it be prompted at runtime, where you then put in a yield goal either per zone or across the field. Additionally, soil nutrients, this is maybe the core function here where we can look at your lab results. And in this case, for my potassium rec, we're going to equate for potassium and CEC and utilize that to come up with a rate of pounds per acre to apply. So with that, now that we've defined our variables, which is a yield goal and a potassium and CEC result, we can now create an expression. And again, this is, if this overwhelms you, this is where we can help as a FarmQA support team, or simply copy and paste from existing formulas. That's very common as well. With this, it's an expression, an Excel-based expression that designates CEC results and potassium results being in certain ranges, which results in certain rates being outputted from the equation. So with that, you can also take our off-the-shelf expressions and edit them to make them more specific to your needs. But that is one example of an equation. And then for the sake of this demo, I'll also show that I've got, say, a lime formula. I've got nitrogen recs, phosphorus recommendations as well. So with that, we won't go too deep beyond that, given there's a separate video on this in more detail. So with that being said, we have soil results, we've got a formula created. Our value in this at this time is to now be able to run that across a set of fields. So what I will do here is I've got, in my case, my zone fields, and I'm going to use my, actually I'm going to use the grid examples. So in this case, I know we've confirmed that we have results on these three fields. I'm going to use the grid formula 1, 2, and 3 as to batch run this formula. New button across the top around run formula. I can give the session a name, so you can call this full rate. And a good example for a name would be you could use this to later on reference if you want to run this again at 80% rate, 60% rate, use that for reference. Now with this, I've got the example here to run the data across maybe a set of direct results or across a set of layers. And so in my case, I've got my zone maps created, so I'm going to use that as my starting point. Now with this, I also have my formulas. So with this, oh no, these are the grid fields. So with this, I got my formulas. So I will display, in my case, the formulas that I have created within my account. You could search if you have a lot of formulas and you want to restrict that down. But I know that I want to generate a potassium and a phosphorus recommendation across these three fields. I'll select those as formulas. Now with this, the changes that I'm making right now are specific to this grid formula 1 field. If I click on formula 2 or 3, you'll notice that there are no formulas chosen. But with that, I can apply to all fields. So now in doing so, it takes my settings that I've done within these fields and it pushes it over to the other two. So now we're in an identical state. That becomes relevant more so with say the products. And what I'll talk through here is if I want to, again, my formula kicks out how many pounds per acre of potassium. If I now want to associate potash with this equation, I can do so. And phosphorus, I'm going to associate MAP. Now with this, I could say with potassium, we have this concept of multipliers, min-max rates, a switch point, rounding intervals. So I could say for this field, grid formula 1, it's got a higher yield goal. So I want to take those values and add 10% onto the top. Phosphorus, I want to make sure we don't go lower than 30 pounds per acre on MAP. Now with this, again, those settings are specific to the first field. So now we could say on the second field, we're going to go potash again. Actually, we'll use the apply across all again. So apply to all fields option here. But now in this case, I know I don't want to have any multiplier and I don't need any phosphorus on this. I'm just going to delete that from that one field. And then on this one, let's go maybe a little bit less. We're going to go 10% less in this field. The point to be made here is that as part of this batch, 3 fields, I can still make field level adjustments and tweaks across the fields based on the multipliers, products, and equations. Now when I hit process, it's going to run those 2 equations across all 3 fields, across all the soil results that are required for the formula. And it's also generating the nutrient maps. So for every nutrient, it does an interpolation, creates a color-coded map, and then you can produce a PDF based on that, as we referenced. And so in this case, we're generating quite a few layers that we can then see in the map view shortly. As this is generating, I would also call out that we have layer profiles. And so what I'm about to show as far as layers and styling for your outputs, you have a lot of control around the color palettes, around the breakpoints, the interpolation methods, and that's all underneath this layer profile button. I won't go into details on this webinar, but that is the function for that, is allowing you to customize the outputs to your requirements, as we've heard a lot of different feedback from customers on how they want that viewed and represented within their account. So with this, I would also say too, you could have run this across the zone fields just the same. And so in this case, I could have selected all 6 fields. And then on the zone fields, it's actually running the same thing of selecting the formulas, selecting products and multipliers. Just in the case of zones, it won't generate new interpolated maps. It'll use those same zone shapes and polygons and give each polygon an output from the formula. So that's the difference there. While this runs, we'll jump into, there you go. So it just exceeded all 5 formulas across all the fields. So if we jump in and we view, in this case, one particular field, what we just did generated a series of layers and maps. And so with that, by default, this might be collapsed. So if I expand it out, I now see my underlying, in this case, my management zones. I've got some prescriptions that I've written, and then my soil results. So with that, I have the results from the day. Again, that full rate is the name of the session, and can just be used for yourself to keep clean records here. As I click in, I can see the sample points of where I took samples and the IDs. But this is where you start to see the maps. We create a phosphorus interpolation showing us where the results were across that field. I can also view the output of the formula. So if I click actually back here, we'll say it's 11 pounds per acre of phosphorus. So that's calling for 131 pounds to be applied in that area. And then because I selected map, it's also producing an output for an actual map rate. So again, 11 pounds for a test result comes out to 131 pounds per acre of phosphorus. And then with that, it comes out to be 253 pounds of map needed. Same concept for potassium. Note different color profiles in this, and so the styling is something that you can define. Sulfur, organic matter, so on and so forth. So with that, in that one batch process, we generated all the maps, we generated all the prescriptions. From here, I can now select and be more selective around what goes into the print map book. So I've selected a handful of maps here, and I'm going to generate the export button, or click the export button. With that, I can export all these layers as shape files or as PDF. And then with that, options to include pins on top, what you want the labels to represent. And then with that, we'll generate an example here. What I'm doing is what we call our print map books. And this, again, can be sent to a client as a way of showing your work, if you will, of your lab results, interpolation of that data, a page per nutrient in this case. Excuse me. So with that, we also have the ability to show just the prescriptions, which I will show here later on in the conversation, but this is more of the nutrient maps, and you can always just get a PDF of your prescriptions if that's a need that you have as well to send out along with the shape files of the machine readable outputs. Excuse me. So with that, here's the output where it has your company logo. In this case, the field is for Minnesota Farms Grid Formula 1. It has an output showing you the sample IDs and locations. And then as mentioned, a page per nutrient, phosphorus with some styling, the map prescription with some styling as well. followed by your potassium, so on and so forth. So with that, that is what can be sent out as a PDF. And then I should call out the data table down below is showing you your acreage, min-max rate of that nutrient, and then also breaking it down into the groupings or the stylings of the nutrient rate, parts per million of potassium, along with the average. And then with this, you can, again, style it so it has more, maybe 10 zones and different colors, etc. So with that, that is the formula-based prescription functionality. I'd love to have you try it out. Value is formulas, batch runs, print map books, and helping you with that process along the way. I should also call out with, say, the prescriptions. You can always edit this real time. So I could say this is formula kicked out at 340. I'm going to trim these down manually to 3, just some more maybe clean values here. 750 there, etc. So as I do that and save, that is now taken by the prescription, and those are the new values shown here as well. I talked about prescriptions. So under the field tab, you can see specifically your prescriptions. So across all those formulas, I can now select all of those prescriptions and just push that into a PDF as well. And in doing so, that creates, there will be no nutrient maps in this particular PDF. It'll just be prescriptions. But as part of this, you then get also product totals for, in this case, MAP and potash. So here's that output showing you the combined totals of MAP, 23 tons across all 4 fields, 117 tons of potash, and then the corresponding prescription files with that. All right, next major feature as we go through this would be our nutrient blender. So this functionality is based on you as a user having fertilizer products set up within your account. So in this case, you can see I've got liquid and dry fertilizers as options in my dropdown. In doing so, you can then set up your nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and micronutrient analysis values of that product, and then set up default rates and pricing if you so choose. But as part of that, you can now create your blends. And so in this case, I've got a new tab over here. You can see a breakdown of my previously written blends or created blends. I can click the plus button to create a new blend. So we'll say, what's new webinar blend? I can choose my fields. So in this, you could say, I'm going to manage these fields similarly to each other based on their yield goals for fertility. And so I've done a selection of a handful of fields. It calculates the total area of that selection. A big part of the nutrient blender is coming up with your goals or your needs. And so if I click on the goals, a couple things happen. So first of all, we have the nutrient coefficients. These are account defined, I should say, where each enterprise has their own custom set nutrient coefficients for NPK. You can set one for micros as you'd like. But with that, it's whatever value you believe in as far as removal based on yield goals. But now within this, you could say, I'm going to try to average 200 bushel corn. Below this, it gives you a view field by field of saying, for this field, 75 acres, 200 bushel yield goal. Even this one, I think it's going to be slightly higher, and this one maybe slightly lower. But what it's doing is it has a calculated goal. And then with this, if we have lab results, it will pull in the lab results for that field. So I'll pull a handful here. And so what it's doing is saying based on removal, you need 200 pounds per acre of nitrogen, 100 pounds of phosphorus, and 240 potassium. But with your lab results, that leaves you with only needing 81 in this field and none of the other nutrients. And so in the end, what it comes down to is the combined goals across the bottom. So it's saying across these 4 fields, a weighted average. So the fields with bigger fields, more acreage, their values weight more heavily into the combined goals. It's telling me I should create a blend for 113 pounds of N, 36 phosphorus, 87 potassium. With this, you can always override to say, let's just make that even 110, 35, 85 blend. In saving this, it now comes up with my goals. So it's telling me I should, again, goals pull through. But now where things get interesting is I can now add my applications. And think of this as you can do a whole year's planned in the sense that I can choose a mix. I have pre-built a couple of corn fall fert blends where I've got urea, MAP, potash, AMS, but blank rate. So I just know that I want to apply, those are the products I'm going to have available to me. And maybe you want to do a, let's say, corn starter in this. So with this, we'll have the corn starter 2x2. And with that, I've got some MAP and zinc sulfate going down. And those rates are fixed. So I'm not going to change that. That's the maximum I can put on without burning the crop. But in doing so, it's telling me that I've 13 pounds of nitrogen were contributed from that starter blend, 62 phosphorus. And so with that, actually, maybe I'll dial that down just for the sake of the numbers here. So you can change numbers, edit button, adjust the rates in this case. And so with this, you can see it now I've got 31 pounds of phosphorus and some zinc and sulfur getting picked up there. So that leaves me with my fall fertility to make up the remainder. So with that, we have the needs column, 103, 485. We added in this little calculator button, and that as I click that, that allows you to visualize the pounds per acre of nutrient along with the application rate of that product. So what you can do in this moment is say, maybe work backwards, potassium, you need 85 units of potassium, so I'll go 85 here. As I do that, it calculates out that I need 141 pounds per acre of potassium. Phosphorus, I only need 4 pounds from there. And then finally leaving me with nitrogen coming all from the urea, so 103 here. Basically all that needs to come from, we'll go 102, comes from there. So as I do that and save, now you can see I've met the needs of all those goals. And in this case, I don't need AMS, so I'm going to delete that out. So with that, that's the equation is balanced, if you will, and I can save this blend. Once I do that, we're calculating some numbers here around the analysis. So it's saying you're going to apply this at 65 pounds per acre of this blend, 6.631 corn starter, and then you're going to apply 371 pounds per acre of this 103, 485. We added in the concept of bulk density. So now back on the settings products tab, you can put in bulk densities of your product. And then we're going to weight that to come up with your bulk density of the blend. If you have pricing set, we're also going to calculate that. As I expand out, you can see we also show you the components and the totals that go into that component, go into the blend as far as urea, MAP, potash. Product totals, we're showing you your MAP, potash, urea. And this would be, again, in this case, I've got MAP in the spring and the fall. So that total is the sum of both those. And then the cost here as well, coming up to a total cost of $67,000, $125 an acre for your fertility blends across those fields. Export, so we have some specific exports for blend reporting. As I click on that, it generates a PDF, excuse me, PDF here, and that represents, in this case, just a PDF view of what we just talked through. There are some PDF options here of being able to, just close that, let's see here. The ability to see this data, but the PDF options would allow you to condense the components of the blend. And then additionally, you see the total. You can hide this as well. So if you really just want to show the blend and the rate, you can do that as well. So with that, you can also, so you have all these blends, and when you do reporting, you can also multi-select and get a more summarized PDF across multiple blends if you need that as well. So again, with that, FarmQA, we're trying to put more weight behind our fertility functionality, and more on this to come as well in the coming months and years. Additionally, so the third option on my list was the lab submittal sheets. So with this, we've heard from customers using a lot of different labs across the country that we need to help out with the submittal process. And so with that, we created a generic lab submittal form. But then with that, this enables us to start building at a rapid pace additional integrations to labs to help with submittals, essentially saying I've got a dozen fields that I'm going to test with a certain lab package, and you're going to get a PDF generated from FarmQA, designating to the lab what's in the box with a QR code that they can scan. And then with that too, like I mentioned on the start, that will allow us to pull the data in more programmatically on the back end. So with this, I'm going to start by showing the Labs tab. And in this, you can see I've got my AgVice, that's our integration partner currently, but I also have this other lab that I've created. So you can add new labs. So I've got the add new lab option, and you can use the other lab. And what this allows you to do is it allows you to set up your account number, contact information, and analysis packages. So that is critical information for us to be able to include on the submittal form. So it's allowing you to define that critical information for us to then stamp it on the report. So I can add analysis packages that you work with and hit save. Now, as part of this, the submittal forms are all tied to work items. And so with this, if I create a new work item, let's just grab a handful of fields here, and I schedule a task, and I'm going to do, let's just say, composite sampling. So in this, I have in this view, actually, let's go back. Let's do, we're going to do grid sampling. So in this, I've got a handful of fields. I have the option to recycle through my points from the prior year. This is existing task functionality, but just showing it real quick. I can lay out a new grid on this field. And then as a third example, I'll just show that instead of doing either of those options, you could freehand drop some points in here. And then finally, you could just say, I know that I need 15 points based on the acreage of that field, but I'm giving the user freedom to define that within the field as they collect. Now, new functionality here is I could say I'm going to choose that lab package I set up, and I know I'm doing 2 depths, so 0 to 6, 6 to 12 samples. I choose my packages, so the top I'm doing C1, C2, and a deeper depth just C2. Again, this is what gives the lab the information they need to know what to test for once the soil shows up at their facility. Optional start-stop times, assigned to is optional as well. And let's say, what's new webinar tasks? I create those tasks and jobs, and I go through and actually sample them in the field. Before that, you can generate lab submittal sheets. So really 2 trains of thought here. One, we allow you to generate them before you leave the office and have it with you. But additionally, if you sample and make changes, so instead of maybe 20 points, you take 15. If you submit that task digitally in FarmQA, we know to programmatically update the submittal sheet to only have 15 points in it based on what actually happened. So what I'm going to do based on the task type, let's go to our grid samples. And I can see here the jobs I did here. So what's new webinar are the ones at the bottom. New functionality is the ability to select those tasks, the jobs, and then the export lab files is the new function here. So as I click on that, I now have the ability to generate lab submittal sheets. So that's kind of the main PDF you might think of with this function. Lab submittal XML file. What that is if you work with a lab that we are not integrated with, the XML file is what they need to receive to programmatically read in the data from the submittal sheet. And so with that, what you'd want to do is generate the XML and email that to the lab in advance of the box arriving at their facility, so they know what's coming, and then they have that in their database for when they scan the QR code as part of the submittal. Sample labels, optional step there if you want to use our barcodes, but I'll show you the output of these 3 examples. So with that, again, we got 1, 2, 3, 4 fields and quite a few samples on each one of them. What this generates is a zip file, and it has the barcodes for each field. These are the field names. And then with that, submittal sheets, and then I actually XML file, and then more barcodes. So I'll just show you one example of a barcode sheet. In this case, the field name is 48 in this case. You got the depth, and then with that, you've got the different barcodes shown here. Then in addition to that, you also have the submittal sheet. And so what we've done here is there's 4 fields, so we've combined that into one PDF. So it's telling us we pull in the grower name, the farm name, the field name, contact information. We generate this event code, which is relevant for the lab to look up, number of samples, and then the barcode, associated IDs with the depth and the analysis package. And then finally, XML, again, that's not a file that's really necessarily even readable to anybody, the average person, but programmatically that can be read into a database and know what's coming. So with this, that's the submittal process. Again, integrations to come on that, and that's kind of us building out the framework to be able to generate more integrations in the near term. All right, I mentioned the layer transparency, kind of a smaller function that I want to touch on, and then I'll do 2 smaller features, and then I'll talk quickly about the QA Farmer app before we wrap up here. So the layer transparency function, this is the concept of being able to select multiple layers, be able to view them at the same time. So I'm going to clean up this view here, click on the field. So I know that I have layers. I've got some zones I've created. So there's my zone map, and I have some satellite imagery. The new button that controls this function is this plus next to the layer icon. So I contribute this to the layer transparency functionality. And now I also want to look through this and find an NDVI map that aligns well with what I want to compare to see how well my zones did to my originating imagery. So let's just contribute that image. What I can do at this point is I've got the ability here to slide and see transparency. And so with that, it's a couple things. I can look back, compare this to the satellite image as a base map, and so I can see how that corresponds. But in addition, I can start to overlay my zone map as well. And so I can see how that compares to my imagery. So if you look maybe up here, you can see the correlation of my zones to the imagery in that sense of being able to extract out the good and bad areas. That function, and you can do as many as you want. So I could add additional layers here, so now you can see I've got a bunch of options or layers to play with. So with that function is the ability to overlay and then use those sliders to compare data sets visually or spatially. So again, just kind of a quick hitter there, something we've added to bring more value to the layer functions. Another smaller feature, but added a lot of value, was the ability on the mobile app to be able to measure issues in the field using your GPS. So what I will show here is I'm going to click on a field, and in this field, I'm going to start a scouting report. But as part of this, I'm going to go to a numeric entry question. So let's just say cutworms in my case, and or corn leaf aphids, for example. And I'm going to start with doing a map drawing here. So I'm going to say I saw aphids, but with that, I'm going to draw on the map. And so what this tool allows me to do is that I can, within this view, I can use this little truck icon, is what's new here. And because I'm not physically in the field, I'm actually going to use the polygon tool to simulate it. It does the same thing, except for when you're in drive mode, it gives you this record option. So I could hit record, and it would drive, or it would allow me to drive, walk around an area. And in doing so, it would map out the damage area. So in doing so, I'm going to, again, simulate this. So I drove an area, but it calculates out 16 acres. And then doing that again, it would measure out collectively 48 acres. And I can use that as part of the response to my question. And so again, it's utilizing your GPS to measure an area, comes up with a total quantity, and then it's a more precise input So with that, it could then be accompanied with a recommendation that's maybe a spot spray, and you have the exact acres to input into that spot spray. So with that, those are a couple quick hitters along with the main functionality. The other thing I wanted to showcase real quickly was the QA Farmer mobile application. So with that, I'm going to switch over to my mobile phone, and I'm going to share the app here. So we should get my phone coming through. There we go. And then as part of this, here we go. As part of this, I have our new mobile application for the growers. And so what this is, as I mentioned, is the ability for an agronomist to push reports down to their grower, and more of a simplified grower application that has data that's more relevant for them opposed to an agronomist. And that being weather data, where you can see weather information hourly. You can set up spray alerts, where you can define temperatures, wind speeds, min-max values for what your ideal spray conditions are. And then these hourly measurements will color code based on if it's a good time to spray, bad time to spray. So as an agronomist, as you push a recommendation, a grower can then turn around and view this to plan out sprays based on weather conditions. 10-day forecast is defined in here. We summarize the months. We have a long range forecast, 180 days, breaking down your min, max, and precipitation values. And then the conditions at the bottom as well. You can drill in and see more hourly level data on things like humidity down here as well. Grain prices. So this allows me to define the crops that I care to track. So maybe corn and let's just say soybeans. And then with that, I can look up elevators in my local territory. And then we will be monitoring the grain prices, and we can send you alerts or growers alerts where they set up if they want the midday bell, opening, midday, or closing bell. And you can also set a price alert. So you can calculate your cost per acre and set an alert. Once that triggers, we'll send another notification for the alert, and you can set multiple if you want to have kind of stepped up values there. And so with this, we calculate, you can see the cost basis and the cash price, and we'll send you notifications as your triggers get hit there. Bin storage, this allows me to set up bins, and so I could set up the bins on my farmyard and track varieties. I could track total bushel capacity, and then with that, which fields are contributed to each bin. Mention quality, variety, current bushels, and then as I deliver loads, I can be adding to the bin. And the same thing with subtractions. I could be adding this and subtracting real time as I go through. So in addition to that, the main thing would be the agronomy tab as far as the tie back to our existing software. And with that, it's the ability for a grower to view reports. And with that, the visualization remains as far as how they would see that for scouting reports, recommendations in the PDF layout that maybe they would be accustomed to. So in here, you can see a PDF scouting report with the content, and they can be scrolled through across fields, field 2, etc. Recommendations can be viewed, and then in addition, the grower can take action to mark this as completed. And so that's the function of being able to give a date and a time that an application was made. And then in that, you have the ability to track notes as well. Hitting submit, that pushes data back to the agronomist as well to see that record. At the field level, fields can be sorted and searched. And then at this point in time, a grower could put in varieties, plant dates, harvest dates that syncs up with the agronomist as well. And they can see an event log of what's happened on the field, progress, see notes, reports, recommendations, and the crop plan if one has been set by an agronomist. And so again, the intention is to improve communication flow, less text calls to get critical information back and forth between agronomist and grower. And so here's an example of a scouting report, but at a field level in this case. So again, we've got a full webinar on this application that does a deeper dive than that, but just calling out that this is us trying to accommodate the grower needs a bit more robustly through this app. And we did it separately to keep the functionality streamlined and simple with some value adds for the grower around grain pricing and weather data, but a tie back to the agronomist and notification systems for that. Then with that, the agronomist can also do a couple additional things on their side. So with that, there's the ability to see what reports have been viewed, but also the ability to publish reports to the QA Farmer app. So when I say that, I'm going to come back into the web view. I'm going to select a handful of scouting reports within the existing agronomy side of the functionality. And in that, oh, I'm not sharing my screen. All right, here we go. So this is where I was, apologize for that. This is where I was selecting the reports on the agronomy side of the functionality. And then as I generate a report, a third option appears where I can publish this to the QA Farmer mobile application. And what this does is it allows the agronomist to say maybe they use voice text in the field. They've got maybe some edits they want to make, recommendations they want to make on later on. This allows them to only publish those scouting reports when they are ready and it's polished and ready to go to the grower. And so I just want to point out that the publish button, and then the agronomist can see when that's been reviewed or not by the grower with the viewed functionality here. So with that, a lot of new functionality, a lot new is coming in the coming year as well. So again, would love feedback, would love engagement from you all on the things I've shown today to help us refine those functions. And yeah, we're excited for what's to come. So with that, stay tuned. With this, we typically have a Q&A, but this is pre-recorded. So please reach out to the information shown here, and we'd be happy to address any questions that have come up as you've watched this recording. And so that's the support email, support@farmqa.com, along with the support phone number. And then with that, all of our prior webinars. So throughout this particular session, I've referenced different webinars on the formula-based prescription functionality, the blender, QA Farmer. So those in their entirety can be seen or found here as well, along with our YouTube channel with the webinar playlist within that channel. So with that, we're excited for the year to come, and we hope you appreciate the work we've put into 2025 and the functionality. So with that, appreciate the time invested today. Take care.